the teacher of everyone and the life of all people. O Master, be merciful unto me and give me the shade of your lotus feet. May your glories now be proclaimed throughout the three worlds. So we hear about him every day. Now, as far as Lokanath Goswami's identity in the spiritual world, in the Gaudiya Vaishnav Abhidhana, it's stated that he is Manjulali Manjari. And this view is supported by Srila Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur in his writing, his book called Gora Gana Swarup Tattva Chandrika. Gora Gana Swarup Tattva Chandrika, which translates as Light on the Identity of Gauranga's Associates. So he also mentions there that in the spiritual world, Lokanath Goswami is Manjulali Manjari. But in the Gora Gunadesha Dipika, which we often quote, verse 187, Kavi Karnapura writes that Lokanath Goswami is Leela Manjari in the spiritual world. And I read that both Vishwanath Chakravarti Thakur and Srila Kavi Karnapura So, regarding Lokanath Goswami's identity as Manjulali Manjari, Shastra gives a brief description of her in Goloka. It's written that she, quote, resides in the abode of sweetness as a 13-and-a-half-year-old Brajagopi. She dresses in reddish clothes like Sri Radha sometimes does. She has a complexion resembling molten gold, and she serves Radha with her expert skill of dressing and ornamenting. And it's described that just before sunrise, and just as Radha and Krishna wake up and leave the groves of Vrindavan for their homes, Radharani's girlfriends, the Manjaris, crowd around that kunja to receive some of the remnants from their pastimes that night. And at that time, Manjulali Manjari enters the kunj, collects the garlands and the sandalwood pulp, etc., left by Radha and Krishna, and distributes these treasures to the gopis eagerly waiting outside. So that's what Lokanath Goswami does in the spiritual world as Manjulali Manjari. So, Srila Lokanath Goswami was born, or let's say appeared, in this world in 1483 in the village of Talakadi, in what was previously East Bengal, that's Bangladesh now. And his mother's name was Sita, and his father's name was Padmanabha Chakravarti. And like all the previous acharyas we've been discussing, it's mentioned that he excelled in school at a very young age. And actually, Lokanath Goswami's father was a teacher who had his own school. In other words, he was the teacher in his school. And that's where Lokanath Goswami studied, under his father. He was a brilliant student. And it's described that whatever material knowledge he needed to know, he mastered it by the time he was 14. And one day his father called him to his side, and he said, quote, "Son, you've learned whatever knowledge you need to live in this world, but now I want you to learn that knowledge by which you can get out of this world." Unquote. So what did his father do? His father sent Lokanath to study under his guru, which means his father's guru. And who was his father's guru? Advaitacharya. And where was Advaitacharya living? In Navadvip. So Lokanath's father sent him to Navadvip to study under his guru Advaitacharya. And while Lokanath Goswami was studying under Advaitacharya, he made many friends, but his best friend was Nimai Pandit, the Supreme Personality of Godhead. That would be a good friend to have. And by his name, we can also understand that Lord Chaitanya asked Nimai Pandit when he was young. Pandit means that he was also a good scholar. And so they bonded together. How did they associate? They'd come and discuss philosophy. So after a few years, when Lokanath finished his studies, Advaitacharya sent him back to his father. But the problem was that when he got home, he couldn't think of anything but Nimai Pandit. He just wanted to run back to Navadvip. Be in Navadvip with the Lord. We would also like, isn't it, to be in Navadvip with the Lord. Devotees identify the holy dhams as their real home and their only really shelter because of the presence of the Lord there in so many different forms. And again, Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati expresses this so nicely in his Viveka Satakam. And this time it's verse 54. Quote, "The day is spent in business and the night is taken by sleep. A very frightening personality, Yamaraj, with restless feet, strikes a running buffalo in the form of time. It is very difficult to attain the city of Mathura, which is able to wash off all the impurities of the age of Kali, and where my Lord Hari snatches the cupid that now makes my heart tremble." The benefit of being in the Dham. Difficult to attain, but what is the benefit of living in the Dham? You can wash off all the impurities of the age of Kali and snatch the cupid, lust from the heart that makes one tremble. Yes. So he just wanted to run back to Navadvip and be with Nimai. But to keep his restless mind engaged, Lokanath followed in the footsteps of his father, and he started his own tola, which means his own school. But even while teaching, he couldn't stop thinking of Nimai Pandit. It's mentioned he had everything a young man could desire, but he was restless. He had a decent home, he had a career, he had money, he had status in society, but for him, none of that compared to his love for Nimai Pandit. It's described, it all paled in comparison to his love for Nimai Pandit. And again, Prabodhananda Saraswati puts it all into proper perspective. How nothing's as attractive as Krishna or Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. He writes in his Viveka Satakam, quote, "There is no permanence in this body, which is like a reflection of the sun on the water contained on a shaking leaf. O Lord of my life, the desire to see you will remain forever in my heart. Therefore, I do not find any lasting satisfaction amongst relatives, in foodstuffs, in the day or night, at home or outside, unquote. So this was Nimai Pandit's, this was Lokanath Goswami's frame of mind in thinking of his Nimai Pandit. This was his frame of mind. Then one day, after coming home from teaching, Lokanath was attending to his elderly father, and there was a knock on the door. So when he opened the door, who was there? His old friend Nimai Pandit. Nimai Pandit was on tour because he was Pandit. He was expert in the scriptures. And he was on tour as a Digvijay, defeating the atheists and the false logicians and mundane philosophers. And although he was half the age of his opponents, obviously, no one was able to defeat him. No one could defeat Nimai Pandit. And there's a very simple reason why. And that's in Bhagavad Gita. Sarvasya chaham hridi shanivishto matash matirgyanam aponam cha vedaschar savar aham eva vedyo vedantakrit vedavid eva chaham. Krishna says, I'm seated in everyone's heart, and from me come remembrance, knowledge, and forgetfulness. By all the Vedas I am to be known. Indeed, I am the compiler of Vedanta, and I am the knower of the Vedas. So Krishna is saying that, and Krishna is present 500 years ago as Nimai Pandit, eventually to become Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So no one could defeat him. And it's interesting that that's what cultured boys did at the time. Brahminical boys. They weren't playing soccer or cricket or anything like that, like they do today. Their fun was to travel and debate. So there's Nimai at the door. There's Lokanath, friends forever. And Nimai asked Lokanath, he said, I'm traveling around, I'm debating with different philosophers. Do you want to come with me and help me defeat them? So when Lokanath asked his father for permission, his elderly father immediately said, yes, go. So the two of them, Nimai Pandit and Lokanath, they traveled like that for several months. We should note, though, that their desire to debate and defeat other philosophers and philosophies, it was not out of pride or arrogance, but actually it was genuine compassion within their hearts to bring these people, if at all possible, to Krishna consciousness. There were so many philosophers out there speaking so many different things, but the reality is really Krishna consciousness. So there's another beautiful verse in this regard from Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati. Because I just finished reading the book and these verses are fresh in my mind. So here's a relevant verse in this regard. Quote, some people are very skillful in using strong words and logic. Some talkative people are skillful in wrangling, jalpa. Others are very strong in quibbling, vachchala, giving fruitive answers, jati, pointing out flaws in arguments, nigraha, and presenting capitious arguments, vitanda. And there are others who know the anecdote that there must be fire on the hill since there is smoke. They all experience the end of their lifespan in this way. I take pity on these scholars who are averse to the wonderful descriptions of Lord Sri Krishna. Unquote. That's text 71 of Vikek Satakam. So in this way, in that mood, that they all experience the end of their lifespan in this way. I take pity on these scholars who are averse to the wonderful descriptions of Lord Sri Krishna. So in this mood, in this way, Nimai Pandit and Lokanath, they traveled and debated with others together. But after some time, Nimai went back to Navadvip, and Lokanath, he went back to his parents because they were getting elderly. And he stayed with them for 5 years until they left their bodies, went back to Godhead. We mentioned how we have that obligation to our parents in our last lecture. But as soon as his parents passed away, he renounced the world. And he immediately went to Navadvip to be with his friend and master, Nimai Pandit. I say master because according to that book, Gaudiya Vaishnav Abhidhana, during that visit when he came back again to Navadvip, Nimai Pandit initiated Lokanath as his disciple. According to the Gaudiya Vaishnava Abhidhana. And it was Lokanath's desire to stay with his master, his friend and his master. But like all the other Goswamis we've discussed the past few weeks, who also wanted to stay with Nimai or with Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, the Lord had other plans for Lokanath. We'll start calling him Goswami now because he renounced everything. Lokanath Goswami. Prabhupada said, I have my plan, you have your plan, and the Lord has his plan. So what was the plan? Nimai said to him, quote, no, Lokanath, you go to Vrindavan and discover the lost places of Krishna's pastimes. Take your friend Bhugarabha, also Goswami, and find these lost places of Krishna's pastimes. So for a moment, Lokanath Goswami, he stood there, trying to take this in, that he had to leave Navadvip, and he had to leave Nimai Pandit, leave his master, spiritual master. And as he was taking that in, he fell unconscious. And when he came to, the acharyas say that it was only with great effort that the Lord was able to convince him to actually go to Vrindavan. In fact, it's described they had a little debate of their own. You should go, but I'm so attached to you, and how can I live in separation from you? And no, but you must go, we must find these lost, there's kind of a debate going on. But the winning argument to convince Lokanath Goswami to go to Vrindavan came from the Lord in the form of a one-liner, you could say. And what was that convincing argument? Not an argument, but a convincing statement that touched the heart of Lokanath Goswami, and by which he agreed to go to Vrindavan. Nimai Pandit said to him, quote, a servant can only be truly happy when his master is happy, unquote. A servant can only be truly happy when his master is happy. So it's true. So Lokanath, he finally gave in. And at that point, Nimai said, find Bhugarabha Goswami and be on your way. Now, Bhugarabha Goswami was a disciple of Gadadhar Pandit. And when Lokanath Goswami found him and requested that he come with him on the Lord's suggestion to Vrindavan, Bhugarabha Goswami was horrified. horrified at leaving the Dham, Navadvip, to which he was very attached, and horrified to leave Nimai Pandit. But Lokanath Goswami was able to convince him with Nimai's wisdom. Quote, "A servant can only be happy when his master is happy," unquote. So within a few days, the two of them left, and they started walking from Navadvip to Vrindavan. And the path, or the road they went through, took them through Rajamahala, the village of Rajamahala, Tajapura, Purnia, Ayodhya, Lucknow, and Gokul. You know, we haven't heard of some of those places, but they're relevant, they're important to us because these great saints, they passed through there on their way to Vrindavan. So it was a long and arduous journey. It took them 3 months. But when they finally arrived in Mathura, which is just before Vrindavan, it's described that their bliss knew no bounds. You can imagine the austerity of traveling through these forested areas, these jungles, you know, with all kinds of dacoits and thieves and tigers and so many diseases, etc. But when they reached Mathura, their joy no bounds. I think we've all experienced that to a certain degree, haven't we? When we get off the plane in Delhi and we take the taxi to Vrindavan, or when we're in Kolkata and we take the taxi to Mayapur, as we get closer and closer, our bliss knows no bounds. And yes, this is the effect of these holy dhams. These holy dhams are so wonderful, a source of great inspiration. And Srila Prabodhananda Saraswati, he puts it very beautifully, again, in one of his shlokas. He writes, quote, "Mathura gives a taste for your devotional service and makes one's mind feel no attraction for the path of material existence. It spreads your blissfulness, removes darkness, and throws all calamities far away. It gives the pleasure of saintly association and churns the ocean of honor. O Gopinath, please bring me to Mathura, for I have a desire to see your lotus feet." It's a beautiful verse. I want to recite it again. He's appealing to the Lord, to Gopinath. Quote, "Mathura gives a taste for your devotional service and makes one's mind feel no attraction for the path of material existence. It spreads your blissfulness, removes darkness, and throws all calamities away. It gives the pleasure of saintly association and churns the ocean of honor. O Gopinath, please bring me to Mathura, for I have a desire to see your lotus feet." Hare Krishna. So, upon arriving in Vrindavan, Lokanath Goswami and Bhagarbha Goswami, they were first met by a devotee called Subhuti Mishra. And Shastra says that he was actually the first follower of Lord Chaitanya to go to Vrindavan. Then came Lokanath and Bhagarbha, and then came the 6 Goswamis, and then came the second generation, Narottam, Srinivasacharya, and Shamananda Pandit. So after settling in, Bhagarbha and Lokanath, they started taking up the task given to them by Chaitanya Mahaprabhu to find the Leela Stans. And it wasn't easy because Vrindavan was a jungle, and they only had some very vague, described scriptural references to work with. And aside from some tribal people, there was no one else living in Vrindavan. But the acharyas say that due to their purity and spiritual advancement, they were able to find holy places amongst covered ponds, temple ruins, and landmarks resembling the descriptions they had in these few scriptures that they were working with. And I read, it's interesting, they were keeping records of their findings, and they even began to draw rough maps of Vrindavan, with, noting where the holy places were. But although, again, they were living in very austere conditions, they were happy. It's described because of their service to Nimai Pandit, their service to Guru and Gauranga. That's our life also. Our happiness comes from our service to Guru and Gauranga. Wherever we are, whatever we do, we always connect it to our spiritual master and Krishna. So we're happy. And that's how they were. But suddenly one day, some news came from Bengal, which brought this work they were doing, the Seva, to a stop. And what was that news? That Nimai Pandit had taken sannyas. Now, as we described the other day, different devotees took this news in different ways. Some were greatly disturbed that the Supreme Personality of Godhead, the Supreme Enjoyer, had become a renunciate. This is not right. Of course, Mahaprabhu did it for a particular purpose, because even today we see here in India, people have a natural respect for sannyasis and listen to what they say. So Mahaprabhu had the most important message for the people of Kali Yuga: chant Hare Krishna. So that's why he took sannyas, or one reason he took sannyas. So, but many of his devotees were disturbed, you're living the life of a renunciate now. But other devotees like Lokanath Goswami, Bhagarbha Goswami, they were enlivened by this news, because they knew the heart of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, in that he wanted to spread Harinam, spread the glories of Krishna consciousness all over the world, everywhere, to every town and village. Encourage people to chant Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. And now he was inaugurating that amazing mission. Amazing mission. In Sri Chaitanya Chandamrita, also by Prabodhananda Saraswati, we hear how amazing this mission is. I think it's text 130. Quote, had anyone even heard of something known as prema, as the ultimate aim of mankind? Did anyone know the divine power of the holy names? Had anyone entered the sweet, charming forest of Vrindavan? Did anyone know Sri Radha as the embodiment of the highest transcendental ecstasy, the personification of the furthest reaches of the sweetness of conjugal love, as supremely worshipable, worthy of the fullest limit of loving adoration? Only due to the absolute compassion of Sri Chaitanya Chandra were these rarest gems discovered, found shimmering in the darkness of Kali Yuga, lit by the moonlight of his benevolence. Whew. That's the mission of Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So they were enlivened. Now it's happening. So upon hearing this ecstatic news, they had a very strong desire to see the Lord as a sannyasi. They'd seen him as Nimai Pandit, and he was very beautiful as Nimai. But as the sannyasi, as Sri Krishna Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, his full beauty was revealed. And again, the Chaitanya Chandamrita describes the Lord It describes Mahaprabhu as a sannyasi. This is so beautiful. Listen to this. Aho, I say, the 10 directions reverberate with the resounding din of dancing feet. The earth is muddied with his tears. The vaults of heaven fill with the pure joy of his boisterously loud laughter. His bodily luster is as illustrious as the golden light of the rising full moon. The movements of his subtle waist cause his saffron garments to undulate with the swelling surge from the ocean of ecstasy. Who is this divine person, dancing with rapturous abandon in the fragrant gardens, on the shore, at the ocean, at Jagannath Puri? Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu ki. Who is this divine person, dancing in rapturous abandon in the fragrant gardens, on the shore of the ocean, at Jagannath Puri? Chaitanya Mahaprabhu. So he was very beautiful. So they wanted to go see him as a sannyasi. So learning that Lord Chaitanya had left Puri and traveled to preach in South India, they wanted to go and see him there. That posed some difficulty because, of course, South India is very vast. And in those days, of course, there was no, social media to find out where he was. But they took their chances and they traveled south and tried to find this beautiful sannyasi, Gauranga, Supreme Personality of Godhead. But they weren't successful. And in time, we're talking some years now, I think 5 or 6 years, in time, Mahaprabhu made his way to Vrindavan, actually. So when Bhugarbha Goswami and Lokanath Goswami, who'd been searching all over South India but never met Chaitanya Mahaprabhu, when they heard he'd arrived in Vrindavan, where they had been, they immediately started on the way back. But as soon as they arrived back in Vrindavan, they discovered that Lord Chaitanya had left Vrindavan a few days earlier to go back to Jagannath Puri. So they decided to follow him to Puri. They wanted to catch up with him. But on the way, within the first few days of their journey, Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu appeared to Lokanath Goswami in a dream. And he gave him a very firm instruction. Lokanath Goswami, I'm always with you in Vrindavan. Return there and never leave again. That was the instruction. So humbled, Lokanath Goswami and Bhugarbha Goswami, they returned to Vrindavan, and they returned to the work that the Lord had given them. And the acharyas, one acharya writes very nicely, they would now be satisfied by seeing him, not with their eyes, but through their seva to him, through their service to him. But shortly after returning to Vrindavan, the Lord satisfied a secret desire that Lokanath Goswami was keeping in his heart. Because if he couldn't see the Lord directly, he had this secret desire to have the Lord in a form of a deity. This was his desire. So, knowing that, because the Lord is in the heart of every living entity, the Lord appeared to Lokanath Goswami in a most beautiful way. It happened when Lokanath Goswami was staying in a kunj, in a grove, near the banks of Kishori Kund. Kishori Kund is a special kund, a special lake where Srimati Radharani took her coronation bath after being declared Queen of Vrindavan by her Gopi girlfriends. They had a ceremony one day and declared her queen of Vrindavan, and her coronation bath took place in Kishori Kund. A beautiful, I've seen that kund, it's very, very beautiful. And that's where he was doing his bhajan, Lokanath Goswami. So one day, while holding a deity of himself, Krishna appeared. There's different versions, but again, this is my favorite. Holding the deity of himself, Krishna appeared before Lokanath Goswami and said, Lokanath, you may now worship me in this deity form. This deity is known as Radha Vinod. So Radha Vinod means he who gives pleasure, Vinoda, to Radha. He who gives pleasure, Vinoda, to Radha, Radha Vinod. So Krishna gave the name. You may now worship this deity of me known as Radha Vinod. Then Krishna very carefully placed his own enchanting blackish form in Lokanath Goswami's trembling hands and disappeared. And it's described that Lokanath Goswami was momentarily perplexed because he was thinking, I don't even have a hut in which to live. How can I properly take care of a deity? So in response to Lokanath's perplexed state, the deity, Radha Vinod, smiled and said, and I quote, "First you call me to accept your worship," from within his heart. "Then when I come, you complain. But don't worry, Lokanath. Like you, I reside in this forest of Umrao. Just make some arrangement to feed me, but quickly, I'm hungry," unquote. So hearing this, Lokanath was like floating in waves of prema. But somehow he managed to prepare some rice, and he offered it to the Lord in a fresh banana leaf. And then while Radha Vinod was taking prasadam, it's described that Lokanath just gazed at the breathtaking beauty of his deity while he took the prasadam. So when some local villagers heard that this beautiful deity had appeared to Lokanath Goswami, they wanted to build him a proper kutir to live in, a bhajan kutir, because he was just living under a tree. To build him a proper kutir to live in, and where he could worship the deity, but Lokanath Goswami refused. He was so renounced. And he continued to live like that. It's described in the jungle, under a different tree every night. And in fact, Radha Vinod's temple became a simple cloth bag that hung around the neck of Lokanath Goswami. That's how he worshipped his deity. Not very much paraphernalia was there, but full bhakti or devotion was there. So he used to actually, when he'd wander around Vrindavan, he'd carry that deity in a cloth bag. And he'd feed the deity, forest fruits and some vegetables he'd dig up and, like that. But the amazing thing is that, of course, he continued with the service to Mahaprabhu, which was to find the lost places of Krishna's pastimes. The amazing thing is that the deity, Radha Vinod, in the bag, was pointing out to Lokanath Goswami, "Oh, here I performed Rasa Leela with the gopis, and over there I took prasadam with my cowherd friends, and here my mother bathed me." Radha Vinod was speaking to him, revealing the holy places, because who knew better where these holy places were than Radha Vinod, the Lord himself. So sweet. But then, after some years, the most unfortunate news arrived in Vrindavan, the most devastating news, and that was that Sri Chaitanya Mahaprabhu had wound up his pastimes, and he'd left this world to go back to Goloka Vrindavan. And suddenly a wave of lamentation just covered northern India for the most part. Devotees hearing this news, they couldn't even lift a pair of kartals to do kirtan. And if they managed to do kirtan as described, thinking of Mahaprabhu while chanting Jai Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Gadadhar Shivasari Go Bhakti Dhira, they'd fall unconscious. So for all practical purposes, you could say for the time being, the Sankirtan movement came to a halt. There's actually not much information given about that particular time because no one wanted to write about it. It was a very difficult period. But as we mentioned the other day, by the mercy of the Lord, in due time, in due course of time, a fresh gust of air finally came to Vrindavan, the second generation, in the form of three personalities, as we mentioned, Narottam, Srinivas, and Shyamananda Pandit. A fresh gust of air. We should think of our ISKCONs, second generation, in the same way. They must be up to the mark in Krishna consciousness, be able to carry on where we leave off, and be a fresh gust of air in this world. The second generation. Please, be like that. Be wonderful. And so many of you are. So many wonderful, wonderful devotees I think of in the second generation. It gives us great confidence. Things will go on very nicely. 30 years from now, 40, 50, 60, 100, there's 10,000 years left to go. So this original second generation, Narottam, Srinivas, and Shyamananda Pandit, they were young men, but they were very fixed up. Of course, they're manjaris from the spiritual world, but Jiva Goswami took them in, and he trained them in his school, in the philosophy, and in all the arts of devotional service. And at the end of their schooling, he was so impressed with their understanding and practice of Krishna consciousness that even as young men, he gave them prestigious titles so that people would recognize them and listen to them. To Narottam, he gave the title Narottam Das Thakur, or Thakur Mahashaya. To Srinivas, he gave the title Srinivasacharya. And to Shyamananda, he gave the title Shyamananda Pandit. So, in this way, they were given some honor, although he remained very humble. The honor was there so that, again, people would take them seriously. And when they spoke, they would take what they said to heart. So, yes, their first assignment, you could say, was to take the books to Bengal, and in this way, Chaitanya Mahaprabhu's movement would really get started. As Prabhupada said, preaching is the essence, books are the basis. Utility is the principle, and purity is the force. So the word has to spread. And when it spreads, the Sankirtan movement started to unfold. Just like a lotus flower, it's closed during the nighttime, but as the sun rises, it begins to open. You can see its full glories. So with this, the preaching started in earnest. Of course, Mahaprabhu was traveling. He traveled to South India, and he preached all over Nadi in the form of Nagar Sankirtan. But this is you could say a quantum leap in Mahaprabhu's movement starting to spread. Book distribution. Prabhupada said, what will your 10-minute lecture do? But if you distribute these books, people can, well, they can hear Srila Prabhupada and the purports, but the books can go everywhere. So like this, they were given this this responsibility to take the books to Bengal so the devotees there could copy them and the word could spread like that. And this way the movement really began to grow in a most wonderful way, as it was meant to, as it was meant to. Srila Prabodhana Saraswati describes very beautifully in Chaitanya Chandamrita the effect of this Sankirtan movement on the people of Kali Yuga. He writes, and I quote, "With the appearance of the moon-like Lord Gauranga in Godadesh, glass has become gold. Gold has become so many philosophers' stones. Vaidurya gems produce similar matchless jewels. Crows become like Garuda. Crooked, ugly trees become sandalwood trees, and barren trees become wish-fulfilling trees. Is this not wonderful? As the moon-like Lord Gauranga appeared in Godadesh, such love of God, which is like fresh nectar and is very hard to obtain, although desired by the greatest sages, such as Lord Brahma, and yet to be comprehended even by Lakshmi and others, has attained greatness in this Kali Yuga. Now even foolish and sinful people, down to the dog-eaters, have obtained such burning love of God." Is this not wonderful? Now even foolish and sinful people, down to the dog-eaters, have obtained such burning love of God. Is this not wonderful? Now, as we've discussed before, at one point Jiva Goswami wanted these three saints to take the books of the Goswamis to Bengal, but what we haven't mentioned so far is that Narottam wasn't initiated at that time. And Jiva Goswami felt that it was very important that he was initiated so as to have the blessings of the Guru Parampara to accomplish the missions ahead. A divine personality actually appeared in a dream to Narottam and told him to take initiation from Lokanath Goswami. But Lokanath Goswami, out of humility, had himself taken a vow not to initiate. So you could say there was this sort of transcendental deadlock. So Narottam came up with a plan, which would please Jiva Goswami very much, to show himself to be the humble servant of his Guru Maharaj and touch his heart and thereby get initiated so he could go on with his mission. So that plan was that well, as it transpired, every morning when Lokanath Goswami would go to the forest to answer the call of nature, a particular part of the forest, Narottam would secretly place a fresh load of water there, first of all, to facilitate Lokanath Goswami. He'd go early and he'd, actually clean this place, and then he'd put a fresh load of water there. And then Narottam would hide in the bushes. And after Lokanath Goswami had cleansed himself and left, Narottam would again clean that area. So we should note that Narottam was a prince and an exalted devotee, but nevertheless he showed the true spirit of a Vaishnava and his willingness to perform menial service when required. So this went on for 1 year. And Lokanath Goswami didn't know who was doing all this menial service for him. But finally, one day he came a little early, and he saw Narottam getting everything ready there. And that touched his heart. And he agreed to initiate Narottam. So he said to him at that time, quote, "On the Purnima of next month, I will accept you and give you Diksha. Please inform Jiva Goswami of my decision. So that initiation took place. And just after that initiation, Lokanath Goswami took Narottam to a secluded place and he taught him, quote, the esoteric art of devotional meditation practiced while chanting the holy names. The esoteric art of devotional meditation practiced during chanting the holy names. So it was a very deep and very significant diksha, we can see. And because both the guru and the disciple were so qualified, we can understand how Narottam Das Thakur was able to accomplish the amazing things he did within his lifetime. He had received and he had imbibed the most precious mercy. There's a beautiful verse in Brihat Bhagavatamrita, which Srila Sanatana Goswami gives us, which shows how a loyal disciple can be not only empowered, but can be fully enlightened by the mercy of his spiritual master. Padam gopyam api shnikde, shishe vachcham iti shruti, tach churyatam mahabhaga, galokamahi madhuna. It's one of my favorites. Quote, the Vedas say that to a loyal disciple, one may speak the confidential secret. Therefore, O most fortunate one, now please hear the glories of Goloka. Brihat Bhagavatamrita. The Vedas say that to a loyal disciple, one may speak the confidential secret. Therefore, O most fortunate one, now please hear the glories of Goloka. Please, Srila Prabhupada, one day enlighten me with the glories of Goloka. I'm trying to be your loyal disciple. So after blessing him, Lokanath Goswami, you could say, further instructed Narottam in a pastime that was really ultimately meant for our own benefit. And that is that one very hot summer day, a pilgrim came to Lokanath Goswami's, where he was staying in the forest under a tree. And the pilgrim asked, can you help me get some water? I'm very thirsty. But Lokanath Goswami was so absorbed in remembering the pastimes of Radha and Krishna that he had no outward awareness. And therefore he didn't respond to the pilgrim. It's understandable. So the pilgrim, he went to Lokanath Goswami's new disciple, Narottam Das Thakur, who was chanting japa nearby. And he said, oh young Baba, I'm very thirsty. Can you please give me some water? So Narottam Das Thakur was also very absorbed in his japa, in his meditation, but he put his bead back down, he stopped his japa, and he went to collect some water from a nearby well, and he gave it to the pilgrim, who drank it and went on his way. But in the meantime, Lokanath Goswami returned to external consciousness. And knowing everything that had happened, he called Narottam Das Thakur over, and he slightly reprimanded him. He said, Narottam, you should never interrupt your japa for anything, even the pious deed of providing a traveler with water. When a Vaishnava chants the names of Radha and Krishna, he understands he is directly associating with the divine couple. Namachintamani Krishna, Namachintamani Krishna's Chaitanya Rasa Vigraha, Purnasudha Nityamukta Abhinatma Namam Namino. He quoted that verse. The names of Krishna and Krishna are the same, they're identical. And he went on. When we chant Lord Krishna's names, we should be completely absorbed, just like Sri Rupa Goswami, Sri Sanatana Goswami and Sri Raghunath Das Goswami were when they chanted their japa together. They were oblivious to the passing of day into night and night into day. The time we spend with Krishna while chanting his holy names is the most precious and most beneficial time of our day and must not be interrupted for anything. Do you understand me, my son? So as the words of his Guru Maharaj entered his heart, Narottam said, "Yes, my master." And he sat down again and he chanted his japa, this time fully absorbed while thinking of Radha and Krishna, not to be distracted by anything. Of course, we should understand that Narottam needed no instruction on chanting the holy names. Such pastimes take place again for our benefit. We've discussed this principle many times. In the Prabhupada Lilamrita, there's a quote of Srila Prabhupada. He says, quote, "There is a saying in India that a mother teaches her daughter-in-law by teaching her daughter." In other words, the mother will give an instruction to her own daughter, which is actually meant for her new daughter-in-law, like that. So sometimes the Lord, he instructs us through the saints. But it's a very important instruction that we should, when we chant our japa, the best is just to sit, fully absorb oneself in the japa. And there's some tendency to get up and do this or go there or think like that. It should be avoided. Nice instruction. So when it came time for Narottam Das Thakur, Srinivasacharya and Shamananda Pandit to take the books to Bengal, Narottam approached his Guru Maharaj, Lokanath Goswami, and he asked for blessings. He asked for blessings to go. And Lokanath Goswami said to him, "Yes, my son, I bless you to succeed in your mission and make Chaitanya Mahaprabhu happy." And then when Narottam asked Lokanath Goswami if he would be allowed to come and visit him sometime, from time to time, Lokanath Goswami said, "No, my child, you need not come. This will be the last time you see me." And at that point, Narottam fainted. And after regaining consciousness, he took hold of his spiritual master's feet in the Acharya's right, quote, struggling to see his divine master through his tear-filled eyes. Narottam offered his respects again and again, and then he left. And Narottam gloriously spent the rest of his life serving the instructions, the Vani of his spiritual master. So Srila Lokanath Goswami left this world in the year 1589 on the Krishna Paksha Ashtami of the month of Shravana. And his divine body was placed in Samadhi near the temple of Radha Gokulananda. Why was his Samadhi put there? Because that was one of his principal places in Vrindavan where he performed his bhajan. You know, we can imagine again it was jungle at that time. Now, the town of Vrindavan's there, but it was all jungle. So that was one of the principal places where he did his bhajan. So it's described the whole place, that whole area of Radha Gokulananda, it's permeated with his bhava. Permeated with his bhava, the scholars write. Because that's where he sat and chanted thousands and thousands and thousands of rounds. And it's the place where he also worshipped Radha Vinod in the tree, and eventually, of course, a temple came for them. And it's described that's the place he gave Diksha to Srila Narottam Das Thakur. And years later, when Srila Narottam Das Thakur left this world, of course, his pastime's very special. That happened in Bengal. We'll discuss that another time. But he has a dut samadhi. He has a samadhi of milk. His form turned into milk. He was bathing in the Ganges, and as he was being bathed by one of his disciples, his body turned to milk into the river Ganges. So that disciple collected, Ganga Narayan Chakravarti, collected that water. So he has a Dut Samadhi. But later, some of his paraphernalia was brought to Vrindavan and placed in a Pushpa Samadhi next to the Samadhi, the full Samadhi of Lokanath Goswami, a spiritual master. And the Acharyas conclude, thus the master and the disciple were reunited. Thus the master and the disciple were reunited. So today let us conclude with Narottam Das Thakur's prayers to his spiritual master, Lokanath Goswami, and thus glorify the perfect master and the perfect disciple. So Narottam has written, O Lokanath, my master, please be merciful to me. Bless me that Radha and Krishna's lotus feet will always be fixed in my mind, and that I may associate with you in your form as a gopi. O Master, when, by your mercy, will I be allowed to serve the lotus feet of Sri Radha, the best of all gopis? When that time comes, service to the divine couple will certainly flood me with boundless bliss. O Shri Rupa Manjari, O friend of the divine couple, please cast your glance of mercy upon me and sprinkle this very distressed Narottam Das with the nectar of devotional service to you as well. Hare Krishna. So, thank you, Prabhus, again for this priceless service of lecturing on the lives and the teachings of all these divine personalities. Again, by hearing about them, we feel very close to them, and we feel indebted to them to continue their mission of spreading Krishna consciousness all over the world. So I'll finish here, and I think I've been thinking that perhaps next week or in a few days we'll do Jayadev Goswami. He's also a very important part of our Krishna conscious tradition. His deities are Shri Shri Radha Madhava, whom he actually worshipped in Sri Vrindavan Dham himself, down by Keshigat. So he has an illustrious life as well, and some beautiful poems and songs and scriptures that he's written, which we'll be sharing with you. Thank you very much. We'll see you soon. Shishi Gaurnitai ki, Shishi Krishna Balaram ki, Shishi Radha Shama Sundar ki, Vrindavaneshwari Shrimati Radharani ki, Shri Lokanath Goswami ki, Shri Narottam Das Thakur ki, Shishi Radha Vinodji ki, Shri Prabhupada ki, Shishi Gaurnitai ki, Goka Vrindavan Dham ki, Jai Jai Sisi Radhe Shan. Harbo. Hare Krishna, dear devotees, welcome back once again to our ongoing series on the glories of our beloved Sri Vrindavan Dham. I was just thinking this morning, we've been giving this series of lectures for 4 years now, almost to the day, 4 years. Very nectarian service. Nama Om Vishnupadaya Krishna Pishtaya Bhutale Srimati Bhaktivedanta Swaminiti Namane Namaste Saraswati Deve Gauravani Pacharine Nivishesha Shunyavadi Pastita Deshatarine. All glories to Srila Prabhupada. So, once again, we're continuing with our mini-series on Stimulation for Ecstatic Love, based on Srila Prabhupada's Nectar Devotion, chapter 26. Studying the material, it's possible we have a few more lectures in this series, and then we'll move on to something else. For that, I'm thinking of doing a 10-part series on the Gopal deity that Madhavendra Puri found on Govardhan Hill 500 years ago, known now as Srinathji, and presently worshipped in Nathdwar in Rajasthan, a very famous deity. Anyway, today I would like to discuss Krishna's Bigul. Krishna's Bigul. What is that? It's his buffalo horn in English. His buffalo horn. And like all the items we've spoken about in this series, Krishna's buffalo horn plays a significant role in his Braj Leela. In my research, I learned that Lord Shiva also has a buffalo horn, which plays an important role in his pastimes, but more about that later in the class. So according to the dictates of Natya Shastra, the scripture of dramaturgy by the illustrious sage Bharat Muni, Krishna's buffalo horn is instrumental, very important in vachik, meaning a pastime that is performed using dialogue, singing, poetry, etc. Natya Shastra is a compendium of the performing arts, like drama, music, dance. Some scholars poetically, and I say poetically, refer to it as the fifth Veda, saying it takes words from the Rig Veda, music from the Samveda, gestures from the Yajur Veda, and emotions from the Atharva Veda. And I was reading that the dramas of our beloved Srila Rupa Goswami, like Vidagdha Madhava and Lalita Madhava, he based those on this particular ancient scripture. Now in this Natya Shastra, Bharat Muni describes 4 different types of nataka, meaning dramatic actions. Like in a theater, there's many dramatic actions. And the first one he describes is called angig, which means performing a pastime with the expressions of the body, like bodily movement. And the second is vachik, again vachik, means performing the pastime with the help of dialogue and singing and poetry, etc. The third, which is discussed, is aharya. It means wearing different colorful clothes or costumes, as well as different paraphernalia like holding a flute or a bow or a sword, etc. Discusses that. And the fourth is sattvika, meaning how to perform drama with emotion. With emotion. We would say with bhav, with love. So regarding vachik, we'll just discuss one here. Regarding vachik, performing pastimes with dialogue, singing, and poetry, which are all done with one's mouth, we see that Krishna attracts his devotees by his sweet words and by mesmerizing them by his sweet talking. So he's employing this technique. Of course, it's all natural for him. But unlike mortal beings, Krishna can also invoke very deep transcendental devotional sentiments by using his mouth to play musical instruments. In Srimad Bhagavatam 10:21, there's a summary to that chapter in the beginning where we hear the following. The gopis declared to see Lord Krishna playing his flute while taking the cows to pasture is the highest perfection for the eyes. Hearing the song of Krishna's flute, the peacocks dance and all other creatures become stunned when they see them. The ears of the cows stand on end as they drink the nectar of his flute song. And their calves simply stand stunned. The milk they have been drinking from their mothers, others, still in their mouths. So there's an example, Krishna. But another instrument that Krishna plays from his mouth, which also produces profound spiritual emotions in the hearts of those who hear it, is the beagle, or again, the buffalo horn. The buffalo horn. Before doing this research, I knew nothing about Krishna's buffalo horn, but it's really interesting, like all the items that stimulate ecstatic love. So this beagle, this buffalo horn, is known by different names, such as Shringi, Bagulu, and Bhaja. And the personal name of Krishna's buffalo horn is Mandagosha. His buffalo horn is Mandagosha. Now, Nectar of Devotion describes that this Mandagosha, it's always highly polished. Krishna's bugle horn is highly polished. It's circled with gold bands, and in the middle of his buffalo horn, there's a hole. There's a hole. Now, Krishna blows a buffalo horn. He plays a flute, but he blows a buffalo horn in Vrindavan in several specific ways. This is the details. The love is in the details. You can't play a buffalo horn like flute. So there's one hole, and he blows it in specific ways. One is for calling his cows to come back from grazing and come back to their Goshala in Nandagram in the evening time. Secondly, I was reading, he uses his buffalo horn to call for lost cows. Because, in the past times we often hear how a cow goes away and Krishna has to find it. You can't play a buffalo horn like flute. So there's one hole, and he blows it in specific ways. One is for calling his cows to come back from grazing and come back to their Goshala in Nandagram in the evening time. Secondly, I was reading, he uses his buffalo horn to call for lost cows. Because, in the past times we often hear how a cow goes away and Krishna has to find it, etc., one of the boys. So he'll use his buffalo horn to call for lost cows. And thirdly, he uses his buffalo horn to call the asuras sent by Kamsa to fight with him. They're in the area, so come on and fight. He uses his buffalo horn to call them. And just before starting the fight with them, Krishna blows his buffalo horn like a signal to begin the fight. As well, this is very important, as well as to invoke Vira Rasa. Vira Rasa means the rasa of heroic or, brave emotions. He brings that forth through the buffalo horn. And the Acharyas say that just as Krishna's flute ignites the loving Shringar or the Madhurya Ras in the hearts of his beloved gopis, so the buffalo horn ignites this Vira Rasa, heroic emotions, in the hearts of the cowherd boys. That's so nectarian. Now, Krishna also uses his buffalo horn, this is really interesting, to distract the mind of Jatila and Kutila when they're trying to catch Radha and Krishna together in their pastimes somewhere in the groves of Vrindavan. And in Srimad Bhagavatam, in the section Vamsi Gita, we learned that when the Braja Gopis heard the notes of Krishna's flute in the dark of the night, they all forgot their duties and came running to dance in the Rasa Leela. Similarly, on hearing the loud sound of the buffalo horn during the afternoon while in the pasturing grounds of Braj, all the gopas, all the cowherd boys, leave their duties of herding cows and run towards Krishna to play with him. Similar pastime, but a different instrument he uses. For the gopis, it's the flute, and for the boys, it's the buffalo horn. So in a previous lecture, we described how Krishna's flute plays 7 musical notes. You may remember, that's called Saptashwara. Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni. Sa, re, ga, ma, pa, da, ni. The 7 notes in Vedic music. In contrast, Krishna's buffalo horn is not played like a flute. Again, it's blown like one might blow a trumpet, and it makes 3 distinct sounds. Not 7, but 3. A lower sound, a higher sound, and a very loud sound. Shastra says that these 3 sounds appear in the Vedas. They're called Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita. Udatta, Anudatta, and Swarita. And Vedic Brahmanas chant the Vedas in different meters using these 3 principal types of sounds. For what? Well, to invoke the demigods or even Krishna, Yagyavai Vishnu, to invoke Krishna at a sacrificial performance. But in Braj,
Govinda, Purusha, Bhajami, Vedam Karmantam Aravindayakam Bhagavatam Samasitam Buddha Sundarangam Pandharpakoti Kavaniya Vishesha Shobham Govinda Adi Purusha Tamam Vajami Antariya Shasakle Triyavriti Manti Prashanti Panti Kalyanti Chiranti Ananda Chinmaya Saru Vigrahasya Govinda Adi Purusha Tamam Vajani Vishnu Pada Vishnu Padaya Krishna Prasthaya Bhutale Srimate Bhakti Swami Namaste Saraswati Devi Gauravani Prachadini Nirvishesha Shunyavadi Parashara Vishatadini Krishna Prabhu Nityananda Advaita Gadagada Vivada Vivada Vrinda Shri Krishna Chaitanya Prabhu Nityananda Shri Advaita Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare. Krishna, Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama, Rama Rama, Hare Hare.
Hare Krishna, Hare Krishna, Krishna Krishna, Hare Hare, Hare Rama, Hare Rama,
Sri Gaurahari Vajabhakatavatsala Sri Gaurahari Sri Gaurahari Sahi Goshta Bihari Nanda Jasomati Chitahari Dhira Damodara Ishaye Kana Bhova Mandire Basi Karaha Bojana Saka Boise Sari Sari Shukta Shakhari Vajinalita Kushmanda Dalidana Dugda Tumi Dadi Mocha Kanda Udabora Mash Boda Roti Kagritana Taskuli Pista Kakir Puli Payasana Kapura Amrita Keli Ramba Kirashara Amrita Rasalanga Dwadasha Pakora Luci Sinisar Puri Ladura Sabali Bhojana Korena Krishna Hoye Kutuhali Radhikara Pakayana Bibida Byanjana Paramayanande Krishna Korena Bhojana Chale Bale Ladu Khai Sri Madhu Mangala Bagala Bajaya Deya Hari Bolo Radhikari Gani Hari Nayane Rakone Dripta Hoye Kai Krishna Jasoda Bhavani Bhojanande Priya Krishna Subhasita Bari Sabe Mukha Prakaloy Kore Sari Sari Asta Mukha Prakaliya Jata Sakagane Anande Vishrama Kore Baladeva Sane Jambula Rasalane Tambula Masala Tahake Krishna Chandra Suke Nidradela Vishalaka Shiki Pucha Chamara Dulaya Apurva Sayaya Krishna Suke Nirayaya Yasomati Anga Priye Danishtaya Nito Sri Krishna Prasad Radha Unje Hoye Prito Lalitari Saki Gana Avashesha Paya Mane Mane Sukhe Radha Krishna Guna Gaya Hari Lila Ekamatra Jahara Pamoda Bhogarati Gai Thakur Bhakti Vinoda Bhakata Vatsala Sri Gaura Hari Bhakata Vatsala Sri Gaura Hari Sri Gaura Hari Sahi Goska Bihari Sri Gaura Hari Sahi Goska Bihari Jasomati Chitahari Nanda Jasomati Chitahari Raja Govinda Govinda Gopala